Have you ever wondered how everything in nature fits together and where human development sits in that puzzle? That's where ecology comes in. I'm Joe, an ecologist working in the UK, and in this video we're going to explore what ecology really means, why it matters, and how it shapes the world around us. By the end, you'll see your local park, your garden, and even your daily routine in a completely new way. Now, before we talk jobs, laws, and impact, let's get the basics covered. Ecology is the study of organisms and their interactions with the environment. We often split the ingredients of ecology into two big buckets. First being biotic, which is the living things like plants and animals. And the next is abiotic, which is the physical, non-living parts like soil, water, and wind. When these two buckets combine, we end up with something called an ecosystem. Ecology is about understanding ecosystems, which are complex networks where plants, animals, and microorganisms all depend on each other and their abiotic environment. It looks at how those living pieces depend on and influence the non-living conditions around them, and how energy and materials flow through the whole system. Think of your garden. The plants, which are biotic, depend on the soil and water, which is abiotic. Birds, bees, and badgers then interact with those plants and with each other. Even small changes ripple through these ecosystems, and yes, our daily choices, where we travel, what we build, and what we buy can cause those ripples too. So, that's the basic ingredients of ecology. And now that we understand that these ecosystems what these ecosystems are made up of, the next step is understanding how ecologists, people who study these ecosystems, actually organise all this complexity. Ecologists study these ecosystems at a range of levels using a range of methods. Ecology isn't just about everything at once, it's broken down into different levels, and each level answers different questions. We look at these in a nested scale. You'll hear these commonly described as an individual or organism, which is like a single wolf or a single oak tree. We then have populations, which is a group of the same species all living together, like pipistrelles in a roost. We then have a community where multiple species will be interacting, so like the birds, bees, invertebrates, bats, plants, all in a woodland. Then we have an ecosystem, as we said earlier, which is the biological community plus their abiotic setting, like with the soil, the water, and the climate. Then we have the landscape scale. This zooms out to how ecosystems connect across regions or even the whole Earth. Different questions live at different levels, so survey methods and management decisions do too. Majority of ecological surveys have a particular emphasis on these. Tell me in the comments, which level do you find the most interesting? These levels help us structure what we look at. But to make sense of what's actually happening at each level, ecologists rely on a set of core concepts. First up is a food chain. This is a neat linear story of who eats who, from producers all the way up through herbivores, carnivores, and decomposers. In reality, it's much messier and a lot more interesting. A food web is a diagram that connects many chains into a larger network. Both food chains and food webs give good illustrations of trophic levels within a system. The trophic levels show us how energy flows through a system, all the way down from those producers to consumers and to decomposers. Just so you're aware, across trophic levels, roughly 10% of energy often makes it from one level to the next. Obviously it does vary by system, but that is generally why the top predators have relatively much lower populations than the producers. These link directly with another key concept, which is energy flows. These are used to see how energy enters an ecosystem, mainly through sunlight, and moves through the trophic levels illustrated by these food webs. Ecosystems also cycle materials. You've likely heard of the carbon cycle. And I mean, if you've ever kept a fish tank, you'll have probably met the nitrogen cycle. This is where waste is broken down by microbes into nitrates and nitrites and nitrates, then removed from the water through plants, algae, and water changes. All of these are the same idea, it's just a much bigger scale in nature. The next concept is symbiosis. This describes the close interactions between different species. There are three primary types of this. First up is mutualism. This is where both species will benefit, such as bees pollinating flowers and flowers feeding bees. The next is commensalism, where one benefits and the other is relatively unaffected. This is seen where remoras hitch rides on sharks. By doing this, they get free food and they don't harm the shark at all. Third up is parasitism. This is where one benefits and one is harmed, like a tick attaching themselves to your dog. Competition is another concept to consider. This is where species vie for resources like food, space, or mates. This is really clearly seen with plants competing in a woodland for light, or sponges and corals competing for space on a reef. If you've seen that episode of Blue Planet, let me know. Some people group competition with symbiosis. Others argue it does stand apart. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. The last concept for today comes from predators and their predation. This shapes populations and behaviour. A classic example, which unfortunately is no longer part of nature in the UK, is wolves and deer. Where predation is present, grazing pressure and moving patterns often look very, very different. All of that sets the stage, but ecosystems aren't static. To get to grips with this, we need to understand something a lot more dynamic: behaviour. Organisms aren't just shaped by their environment, they actively respond to it. Behavioural ecology studies how behaviour evolves and adapts in response to the environmental pressures and interactions with other organisms. It looks at why animals behave the way they do, through foraging strategies, mating systems, territoriality, and social structures. It then looks at how these behaviours can maximise survival and reproductive success. In the UK, behavioural ecology often focuses on species which are like birds, mammals and insects, examining how factors like climate, habitat fragmentation and human activity influence behaviour. This combines ecology, evolution and ethology to understand the adaptive significance of behaviour in natural settings. If you want us to dive deeper into this, let us know. We now know a little bit about what ecology is and some of its key concepts. But why does any of this matter in the real world? Studying ecology gives us the evidence to conserve species, restore habitats and manage resources sustainably. It underpins how we respond to biodiversity loss and climate change and helps us predict what happens when we alter a landscape, for example by adding a new road or housing development. Without ecological science, it would just be guesswork. But with ecology, we can plan, monitor and adapt. One of the clearest ways ecology affects our everyday lives is through something called ecosystem services. These are benefits that nature provides to us for free. Some of these are essential to everyday life, such as pollination that underpins agriculture and generally keeps food on our tables. We get clean water as microbes and wetlands strip pollutants and regulate flow. Soil fertility is built up and maintained by organisms all the way from tiny microbes to grazers like cows. These services only work if these systems stay healthy. And when those services break down, the costs really do show up in our health, our economy, and our resilience to climate shocks, both locally and globally. But don't worry, it isn't all doom and gloom. Our everyday choices can be positive. How we manage our gardens, what we buy and eat, how we travel, and where and how we build can have a positive impact. But what does happen when we start building on top of those ecosystems? Roads, housing, and industry can completely fragment habitats, stress species, and put pressure on these ecosystems. Ecologists step in to help balance progress with protection. We assess likely effects, design surveys and propose ways to help protect wildlife, whilst also enabling these necessary projects. Central to this is something called the Mitigation Hierarchy. It's a 4-step sequence: avoid, minimise, mitigate and offset. The further down that list you go, the more expensive and risky things become. Projects that can demonstrate strong avoidance and minimisation are more likely to progress smoothly. This is why timing, methods and professional judgment all matter. Good ecology upfront saves money, time and biodiversity. So who actually does all this work? In the UK, ecologists broadly fall into 2 camps, and understanding the difference helps make sense of the roles you'll see in the field. We have conservation ecologists, who typically work for non-governmental organisations or NGOs, research bodies or charities, often leading long-term monitoring and habitat restoration projects. And then we also have consultant ecologists. These will survey sites for clients, analyse data and produce reports for planning, mitigation and habitat monitoring. This is where the balancing development with nature really comes in. But whether you're a consultant or a conservation ecologist, the core of all ecological work is using surveys to collect reliable evidence to understand what is happening at a site. All ecological surveys must be regulated, robust and repeatable. In the UK, guidance, which is maintained by the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management, or CIEM, sets out accepted methods and good practice. It's vital that you use the most up-to-date guidance because methods are constantly evolving. In the UK, there has also been quite a lot of legislation put in place to support the preservation of wildlife and their ecosystems. Many of you will have heard about various protected species that we have, from bats to reptiles and dormice to birds. These are protected by law in the UK, so require particular attention, especially where individuals, populations or habitats used by these species are to be impacted. Some of these species do require licenses for any work that might disturb them. Unlicensed individuals cannot do any work at all around them. They can't even just check for them. Surveys will range all the way from quick walkover checks and preliminary assessments, all the way to multi-week studies. Results from these then inform everything from small planning applications to long-term monitoring and huge-scale habitat restoration. Ecologists also need to consider humans within their impact assessment. Following the guidance and completing these surveys helps ecologists to predict ecological outcomes and plan for any mitigation requirements. Now, once all of the data is collected, analysed and interpreted, it all needs to be communicated. This can be through a range of outputs, from written reports to conferences. These will generally highlight the trends and findings of the surveys, the ecologist's conclusions, and then, if they're required, any recommendations or solutions from the ecologist. So what is ecology? It's essentially the study of life's relationships and the operating manual for our shared home. Ecology is the science of connections between the living and the non-living. We need to bear in mind that everything has a role and every choice we make has an impact, from having a cup of tea to building hundreds of houses. Evidence-based ecology does 2 things. It protects biodiversity and it supports sustainable development. And using the right tools and standards, from survey design and licensing to reporting and mitigation, is essential for good ecological practice. And remember, ecology isn't just for scientists. It affects your health, your food and your future. Now, if you found this video useful, hit like so that more people can find it. Also, tell me in the comments what you'd like us to cover next. A species deep dive, habitats, survey methods, or careers. Start your comment with your favourite local species so that I know you made it to the end. And if you do want more of these deep dives into species, habitats, and also what ecology really means, hit that subscribe button with the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. I'm trying to build this channel into a proper learning path, So your questions will help shape what to cover in the future videos. Now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the field.